Hi everyone and welcome to Pixels, a podcast for the discerning gamer. Hello everyone and welcome back to Pixels, the show where we cover the news from the past couple of weeks in the gaming industry. My name is Patrick Beja and today I'm very happy to be joined by Per Landin. So here in Finland with my Swedish-speaking family, Per, we pronounce it Per.
That's correct, Patrick. That's correct.
Excellent.
First of all, hello to you too. So happy to finally be on the show.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a very long time. We met at BlizzCon a few times when I was working at Blizzard. Actually, we worked together a little bit through the Swedish people in the company. And we've been talking about it for a long time, but it didn't coalesce quite the right way. So I'm glad we finally managed to do it.
We've had this conversation running for a long time, and I really wanted to join the podcast as well, since I'm a podcast producer myself in Sweden. And I think we always had interesting conversations. So, well, stars aligned, and now we're here.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about a little bit about the Shadow the Tomb Raider reveal, a little bit more about God of War, Nintendo Labo being released, some E3 rumors, some financial results, and a bunch of other things. But first, people heard your lovely Swedish accent already. Can you tell the audience where you're coming from and who you are in a few words, so they understand who you are?
Just so you know, Patrick, for some reason people started drilling above my apartment now. So you tell me if...
No, we can't hear anything. It's fine.
Oh, okay, but if it leaks, let me know, because this is super annoying.
All right, no worries. I have a baby in the next door, so I might rival you in the super annoying sounds department.
Okay, perfect. So a little bit about me then. I've been... working in the Swedish gaming media industry for perhaps a little bit over 10 years now. I started my career basically writing an angry letter to a Swedish editor-in-chief.
Really?
For a magazine called Level Presents World of Warcraft, because I thought, hey, you need someone that can write better articles than this. And luckily I had a very good editor-in-chief who said, okay, then prove yourself.
You do it. Yeah, exactly.
And the rest is history, basically. So I later became the editor-in-chief for that said magazine and started my career writing for magazines known as Level, not to be confused with the British one. Went on to write about gaming for Swedish IGN, later PC Gamer, doing a lot of podcasts. Today I'm a creative writer for Mojang and Minecraft specifically.
So you went to the other side. Now you're in the camp of the developers and publishers.
Yeah, but it's such a common transition for us.
That's true.
I mean, among my colleagues, I see so many that make that sort of transition over to PR or to other gaming outlets. And
so let me ask you a question, actually. This wasn't planned, but now that you are, and let me know if you can't really answer things like that, but now that you're on the other side and you see journalists' work as something that is, judging or critiquing what your industry is doing, do you have a different outlook on it, or do you consider things that maybe you did before in a different way? Has that changed your view on how journalists work or operate, or not at all?
That's a really interesting question, actually. I haven't really given it much thought, but I think I've always had the opinion that I take a lot of pride in my work and want to make it sort of right. When I make reviews, I often... Perhaps this is the wrong mindset, but at least for me, I want to have in lack of better words, the right opinion. I want to make sure that I understand the product. And sometimes when I see now, for example, I think that a couple of Swedish journalists, for example, I can believe that, they lack in the research, and maybe they didn't get this exactly right, and you forgot to mention a specific fact. So I wouldn't say that I'm too critical towards
Critical,
them.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, critical, definitely. So I don't know. Perhaps this is something that will come
Evolve.
as I go on. I'm still pretty new to this stuff, so.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the future if you develop some kind of incredible theory about this whole switching jobs thing.
If I stay on the dark side.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you still write as well for Aftonbladet, which is a pretty big newspaper in Sweden in the gaming section. So you still have a little bit of a foot in the on the other side as well. So
I do, and I'm very grateful for that as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that Mojang allows you to do that. Actually, it's a very cool way of approaching it. So.
Yeah, one could say that perhaps they don't value the creative writing part as much as being a real developer, if you understand my. But I'm very lucky. I'm very grateful that I have that as kind of deal. It's actually a little bit shame because I was recently, just a couple of last year, I was working for DreamHack, the esports producer, and I really tried to maintain this sort of deal to write for Aftonbladet, which basically meant that it didn't really work. I got the offer to go to my third BlizzCon, but then basically I couldn't because of DreamHack, which I felt this was the first time I felt, this doesn't work out. I need to make a choice at some point. And
all right. Well, okay, let's move on to the actual gaming news. And the first little tidbit we have is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which got its first trailer revealed a few days ago, which the thing is, it's not gameplay footage, so it's more of a mood intent trailer. And there isn't a huge amount to say about it. It's basically more Tomb Raider, more of the reboot, and they call it the end of the beginning, making a reference to the fact that this trilogy was the reimagining of the beginning of the life of Lara Croft, and after this one she will finally actually be the Tomb Raider, so she's maturing into that character. There is an indication that she's much more or even more fierce and a force to be reckoned with, and she takes out a full group of special commando type army people, and that's kind of a little bit of a change. Maybe you're going to feel more powerful in this game than you did in the previous ones, although you did feel pretty powerful by the end of them. And there's then the other thing, there's a season pass that is going to add monthly content. So for 7 months, you're going to get additional content to the game, which is probably, hopefully the content will be good. But I mean, getting regular content is kind of game as a service for a season pass is kind of an interesting idea. Other than that, it's Maya/Inca, I can never tell the difference, one of the two setting, and she's gonna have to deal with human sacrifice and that kind of thing. It seems cool. It's the third in the trilogy, so it's kind of the more of the same, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, so Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we're going to get the gameplay trailer at E3, the first one, and the game will be released on September 14th, I believe. And so yeah, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is now no longer such a huge mystery. I don't think we can expect some huge surprise from a third game in a trilogy, but I don't know. What do you think about this? I mean, the trilogy, obviously, the reboot is obviously a hugely successful endeavor, and I really appreciate it. I really like the first one and played through a good chunk of the second one. But yeah, so this is the third one, right? It's not a huge surprise.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, it has been hugely popular, and I would say that what was it, 11 million for the first game is actually a really good result. I think 5 years since the reboot now. I can't believe that time flies as much.
Yeah, it was 2013, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to add another culture. You mentioned Mayan Inca. I actually believe it was Aztec. So we have
crap.
a lot of there's a lot of discussion going on right now if it's actually like what it is, because the ziggurat structure is both something that was, I think, both Maya and Aztec specific.
Maybe they're going to have a mix, so they don't have to get the cultural implications. It's possible they'll make something up.
Yeah, exactly. Not to be said, as you say, we haven't seen the gameplay, but as we see the trailer, I have to say that I like the idea of the setting, like this sort of Tomb Raider compared to, say, Uncharted has adopted this, the dark, a little bit more dark in terms of adventure, more
it's very dark,
supernatural,
actually. Right, yeah.
supernatural elements. Just seeing this, as I often look at the setting to become intrigued, and I think when I see the Aztec, I think it fit very well, and I think you have seen the trailer, and our listeners as well, and just the ending of it sets up for a very interesting story. So I gotta say, I'm really intrigued for what's to come for this third.
Yeah, she's questioning what she's becoming, and it's she's becoming the Tomb Raider, but the Tomb Raider might be something that she's not super comfortable with. It would take the character into an interesting direction if she's torn between what she has to be and what she's used to be. So anyway, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, still a pretty exciting game for the fall. Then I did want to go over a little bit of God of War. I did do a very long, half an hour monologue about God of War for the last episode. I'm not going to go into spoilers. I did finish the game. I'll say that there isn't really a huge... I'm not going to go into spoilers. So maybe I'll stop talking. But it was not disappointing.
You did a great job on that anyway. I listened to the pod, and I was just amazed how much you had to say about the game. I haven't played it myself, but I got to say, I couldn't stay away. Right now, I lack a PlayStation to play on, but I still wanted to see what this was all about. And I'm not going to spoil either, but I got to say, when I see what they've done with the narrative compared to the previous games, as this is also somewhat of a reboot in the same fashion as Tomb Raider, the little bit more serious touch, not as I would describe it as comic book.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed what they've done with the character, and also the setting of Norse mythology. As a Scandinavian myself, I gotta say I'm very impressed what's Santa Monica has done with like really good research, and I think the setting is just so perfect for.
That's really actually. I wanted to ask you about it, as you said, as a Scandinavian. So it's not like silly or offensive, or it actually kind of makes sense.
I think what they've done with the material in terms of existing characters in the mythology itself, and sort of make their own version of it without distancing it too far away is actually it's very hard to go into detail and take examples without spoiling anything.
Right.
but I would say the antagonist is a very good example of staying somewhat true to the Norse mythology itself.
Cool.
And compared to the previous God of War games, I think both the narrative and the environments themselves was never that interesting to begin with. I always think that the sort of gameplay and combat experience was the important part of the series. But just seeing this semi-open world, how beautiful it is, I never even thought about it from the beginning as a God of War game, and it's just so. People asked if God of War needed this sort of reboot. I say yes, because this is a total new take on an already beloved franchise.
And I think, my conclusion now that I've basically finished it is it's consistently great. And very consistent until the end, meaning it stays at the same level all the way through. And now I'm playing. There's a little bit of an end game after you see the credits, and I'm going through that, and it is still very satisfying. It's very rare that I keep playing a game after I've quote unquote finished it, and I still am. I'm almost at the end now, and there's still other stuff that you can do afterwards. But so I'm towards the uh, the second end point, which is not really story driven anymore, and it's still very much fun and very challenging. And so I really I confirm my opinion that God of War is one of my favorite games of the year so far, and the year has just started, but I sense it's going to stay in that list.
But would you say that you're still? This is obviously, or probably, the first game in a longer series of games. Are you feeling right now that you're already looking forward to a next game in the same setting to learn
Yeah,
more about this sort of universe?
I mean, I think they will have to change some things because it's so consistent that it's almost the same thing for the 30 hours that you're playing. Um, so it's fun, but I don't want to be redoing exactly the same things for another 30 hours. So I trust that they will change things just enough that it will become interesting again. But I am very much looking forward to what they will do with the next one, and they very much will. I mean, they set up a ton of things that do mean you're going to see another one in that reboot series. It's pretty obvious. I mean, they're not going to throw away God of War, obviously. But yeah, it's in some ways the game feels like an introduction to maybe what's going to be a trilogy or whatever of God of War, and then maybe they'll move on to other things. But opening it up to other pantheons and mythologies means that they have a never-ending supply of settings they can explore. I do want them to stay in this one for a little bit longer, though. I think that the Norse mythology setting is one of the more interesting ones, and um, I yes, to answer your question more quickly, yes, I'm very much looking forward to God of War Norse edition #2.
Yeah, and I can't wait to play it myself. I mean, as I've said, I've just seen the complete story now, but I'm super impressed of what I've seen, and I'm really hoping to get my hands on it soon.
Yeah. And the gameplay is really a big factor as well. It's not more than in a game like Uncharted, maybe, where the gameplay is fun, but really the driving force is the narrative elements. In God of War, the gameplay is very, very much a driving force as well. And the narrative is a little bit under maybe what we can see in Uncharted and those very narratively driven games from Naughty Dog. But the gameplay more than makes up for it. So, anyway. All right, so I'm not going to spoil God of War in any of the shows. I know I said we might do a spoiler special, but I don't really think it's worth it. I'll let you discover it by yourself. Let's talk quickly about Nintendo Labo, which was released last week worldwide. And it's still, I think, an interesting concept, and it's pretty popular in some segments of the gaming population. Obviously, with children being the primary target, it's a little bit specific in the kind of people that are enjoying it. But I have to say, I don't think it's catching fire quite like some people might have expected. We've seen, as we always do when it came out, some people doing funny, interesting things with the piano and doing covers on the piano from the Labo version, and that was cute, like YouTube videos. But I think it's already kind of going away, not going away as a product for Nintendo, certainly not, and they could expand it way beyond what they have now, and I'm sure they would find people to buy it and customers to enjoy it. But it's just in the public eye. It's not anything like let's say motion gaming that really never went away. Or yes, thankfully after a few years it did. But I mean, it was a really hot thing for a long time. Labo is just a side thing for the Switch, which is still very good, but I don't think it's it's not what some people thought it could have been. And again, that's not a bad thing. It's just, yeah, it's cool. It's little cardboard things you're going to play with for a little while. And it's not going to be of interest for the entire gaming industry.
Yeah, it's a weird. It was a weird strategy from the beginning. Just this whole idea. When I saw it, I gotta say I was not very impressed, but I was still intrigued by the idea of this sort of. It was obviously a very creative move, offering a way to explore already existing games and do something outside the game itself. I was basically calling it the IKEA of gaming.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It takes a really long time to put the things together.
Yeah, and some of these products was just so complicated from the beginning. So I believe that that's also part of the reason that you wanted to have this sort of creative setting to sit down and construct it together, probably as a family.
Right, yeah.
From parent to child. And I like the approach that it was an extent of what they already started with the nunchuck, and exploring new ways to play their games, and how Nintendo positioned themselves as a very, first of all, catering towards a younger audience compared to the other consoles, and trying to grow, establish that from a young age. But I don't know, it's just as you mentioned, it's a little bit complicated, and it's not really anything special at all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's special, but for some people, and the very targeted, target that they're aiming for is enjoying it, but it's not growing beyond that. I guess we can put it like that. It doesn't seem to be growing beyond that. Maybe things are going to change. It's only been a week, but and again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that's what we expected, and that's what's happening. And the thing is, with Nintendo, you're never sure if you're going to be very surprised, and you can never know. And I guess in this case, we weren't, but it's worth mentioning because sometimes you're very surprised, and that offers me a very easy transition to the financial results for all three manufacturers. It's different periods. Nintendo and Sony, it's year 2017 fiscal year results. For Microsoft, it's just I don't know how they count exactly, but it's just the early quarter for the year. But the big thing is that Nintendo has made a huge success out of the Switch, which we already knew, obviously, and the numbers we're getting are quite impressive. 505% increase in profit year over year, which sure, last year wasn't great. They were on the dying the dying months of the Wii U, so obviously they weren't going to sell a huge amount. 3DS still chugging along, but 505% profit is pretty big, especially since the console just came out. And Nintendo has always been trying to make a profit out of everything they sell. But usually what you do with a console is that you sell it at a loss in the beginning to gain market share, and then you make up for it with royalties from the games going, down the line, and from the consoles as well, once you've managed to sell enough that it's bringing in money and not bringing in a loss. This has been different in the past few years, maybe, but usually that's how console manufacturers work. Nintendo has tried to make money out of everything they sell, and it seems they've been doing that with the Switch as well, because, yeah, lots of money coming in. Of course, money from the games as well. I think they're at 17 million Switch consoles sold. I might be. Yes, that's it. It's 17.79 million. So that's already more than what the Wii U did in its entire lifespan. And I guess there isn't a huge additional amount of things to say. Just confirming that Nintendo is incredibly successful with the Switch. There's a vulnerability in the Tegra chip, though, that might mean the Switch is hackable, and you're going to be able to install homebrew software like uh, uh, emulators and stuff like that. There might be a hardware thing required, but it seems that this thing is unpatchable. So we'll see what happens there. They're getting a new president. Kimishima has always said he would just oversee the transition, and he's done a great job at it. And now someone a little bit younger is coming in, and we've seen some numbers from the mobile successes of Nintendo. And one number nothing too surprising. One number that did surprise me is the fact that they have 20 million monthly active users for Super Mario Run. 20 million is pretty impressive. I would never have guessed that they still had such a success with Mario Run on mobile.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I've had played Mario Run a lot quite myself, and I think the game itself is quite flawed in terms of how it reward you as you progress in the game. But I gotta say, in terms of Nintendo's venture into mobile gaming, I'm very impressed with the titles that they have come up with. For example, I'm currently playing a lot of Fire Emblem Heroes right now, which I think is
you're one of those.
Yeah, definitely. So, but that's a game I probably never enjoyed a game like that to mobile devices before. So it just feels that Nintendo understands the platform very well, and have established good titles from the beginning. Obviously, looking forward a lot to Super Mario Kart as well. See what they can offer from that end.
And
you
know
believe?
what? Yeah, it's going to be coming out fairly soon. We have more news about mobile games coming up in the. You know what? Let's just talk about this now. Very quickly, I will mention Sony is. The PlayStation is driving Sony very significantly. They have a lot of, big sales, big profits, big revenue. That's not a surprise. Microsoft, which you probably can't comment too much about since you're part of Mojang, but Microsoft isn't doing too badly. They have some numbers that are going up compared to last year, which I wouldn't have expected. But it's the sort of the another example of the fact that even though Microsoft is lagging behind Sony very significantly, I think as the generation progresses, the generation of console progresses, it doesn't mean they're doing badly. They're pretty. They're in the green for everything they're doing. So that's good news as well. And so to talk more about mobile, we have a game from Platinum coming out fairly soon, World of Demons, which is going to be something a little bit more based on timing than pure gameplay, which probably makes sense for mobile. And Platinum is a company that is very, very focused on gameplay. So I'm hoping that we're going to see an interesting game there. The graphics are definitely intriguing. It is very much... it looks like I don't know how you call it in English, Japanese type painting. So that's really cool. We have a new Castlevania game coming out on mobile, which is a multiplayer game. I don't quite know how that's going to work, but Konami at least is still making games. Sure, on mobile, but all right, mobile multiplayer Castlevania. Samurai Showdown is coming out on mobile. We haven't seen gameplay there, so I'm curious, but I don't quite know what's going to happen there. And Nintendo is working with Cygames, I believe, to bring out an original RPG to mobile. It's going to be, I believe, exclusive to Japan in the beginning. It's called Dragalia Lost. And it's an original RPG. It's not even a port of another franchise. So lots of things happening in the mobile industry, mostly in Japan, as we're seeing, because mobile is so dominant there. But these are real gaming companies that are getting interested into the mobile space. So it's quite exciting for people who have been waiting for quote unquote real games to come out on mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a sort of natural step because you already have a platform for a very good platform for revenue, but also as we've seen, it's so impressive what you can actually push out on mobile devices and how better it becomes in terms of graphic, which allows developers to do so much about it. I think when you talked about World of Demons, it has this sort of cutboard.
Right, that's how it's called.
Cutboard
Yeah,
look. Very sort of the Darkest Dungeon feel, almost for those who
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, I play a lot of games on my phone because of the transport to back and to and back from work. Just sounds stupid to tell, but I still feel this is something that is growing. And you mentioned Japan as being the most prominent one, but I strongly believe that this is something that in the West for the upcoming years.
Yeah, I think what's maybe finally starting to happen in the mobile industry. I mean, obviously, gaming has been big on mobiles for years now. It's nothing new. But what is starting to happen, possibly, is that we're seeing games that will be really interesting to core gamers. Usually, what's been it's a different type of games on mobile. And yes, there are some very
Right.
core games on mobile as well. You have some people who will play, I don't know, Clash Royale forever and who are very serious about it. There are guilds, etc., etc. But now we're seeing things like, Fortnite and these developments in Japan, which are bringing traditional game developers into the mobile space, which is, I think, a little bit of a different thing than what we've seen until now with developers that grew up in the mobile space and that make a different kind of game. So I'm really looking forward to that because my phone hasn't really been a huge gaming platform for me until now, and maybe it will be another opportunity to play more games.
Yeah, but exactly for I would say there's no reason for bigger developers with the sort of with the marketing muscle to release games on platform. It's obviously a crazy platform for indie developers to get their games out. It's just overflowing with, I would say, pretty bad titles. Sort of, it sort of drowns, makes it very hard for games to actually become a hit on the platform. But I will say, as we'll see soon, because there's both the technical reasons and, if you're a bigger studio, marketing reasons to make games on the platform.
So they're at a point where they're technically mature enough that you can actually consider making the games you're making anyway. Or at least the style of game you enjoy making as a traditional developer, you can make that happen on mobile platforms now. And
yes, precisely.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about E3. There are a ton of rumors coming out, and most of them have to do with Battle Royale modes. It's kind of crazy. We've been predicting this. We've been predicting this for, a year since the fever of PUBG has started. And now it seems that, let's say 18 months later, and the games will be coming out maybe 24 months after the release of PUBG, that we're going to see the release. I mean, the explosion of the early access of PUBG. And we're going to see Battle Royale modes in everything. And some are a little bit surprising. There's a teaser about Watch Dogs 3, which is separate. But the Call of Duty rumor that we've heard is that the solo experience, the single-player campaign, is not ready. And so they might be dropping it entirely, or maybe they're going to release it afterwards as uh, a DLC or something like that, but they're going to drop it for the release of the game and have only co-op or co-op slash PvP into the game at launch. And one of the titles, one of the modes might be Battle Royale. We're also seeing this with Battlefield 5, which might have a Battle Royale mode, and a bunch of other games. But the Call of Duty one is the most surprising. I mean, I'm a solo campaign player for Call of Duty more than PvP, even though I do play it a little bit, the multiplayer. But I can't imagine buying a Call of Duty game if there isn't at least a solo campaign. To be fair, I haven't bought it for a long time. But yeah, that's another question. How expensive is it going to be? I can't imagine Activision selling a Call of Duty game for less than full retail price, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a very interesting development we're seeing for Call of Duty. But I gotta say, it's intriguing. Going back to E3, I think me and my colleagues have joked about like 80% will be focused on Battle Royale.
Right.
But I think as we're about to hit that sort of oversaturation, I feel that you developers still need to, or almost they're forced to jump onto the bandwagon now to be a part of this. And
but isn't it too late already? Like, if I think that's a big. We have Fortnite and we have a PUBG and we have maybe a couple of other contestants in that. I don't know that there's space for more than two big players in that space. Or maybe there is. I don't know.
We've seen this before. I mean, you will probably recall, like, this is the equivalent of what Blizzard basically did with MMORPGs with World of Warcraft, streamlining and popularizing a specific genre, making it accessible for smart crafting. And I think we're seeing the exact same thing right now with developers trying to cash in on this Battle Royale experience, just hoping that they will find a solution that Epic Games did versus Bluehole, like when even though PUBG was the so to speak the original one, Fortnite managed to switch their strategy from their horde gameplay into this Battle Royale and did it so amazingly well. And I think
and free to play. But I mean,
exactly.
But what you're saying about MMOs is really interesting because no one managed to even compete with World of Warcraft. The big dog was there, and that was it. There were a few MMOs that some of them are still going. There's the Skyrim one. I can't. Tamriel. Elder Scrolls Online. Star Wars, I believe, is still going, so they're still there, and maybe that's what some of these developers are aiming for. Maybe they're thinking, if we catch lightning in a bottle, we can become something hugely successful as well, but maybe we don't necessarily need to eclipse Fortnite or PUBG. Maybe we can just have this little thing in our corner. I guess when you have different genres that are birthed, like even when you talk about racing games or fighting games, everyone was doing their own. Some of them were more successful than others, and some of them remained relatively niche, but it doesn't mean they weren't, a good business for the developers that made them. So maybe it's just a new genre and everyone's going to have their own, but as a mode in an existing game, is this like you need 100 players, or maybe they're going to have like 20 players Battle Royale, but then it's not the same. And do you manage, if it's like one mode in Call of Duty from the 15 different modes, are you going to have enough players? Is it going to be something that is worked on enough? So I don't know that this can work.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there, especially when you have, as we mentioned, a game that usually sells for retail price, and it will not be a free-to-play one. I would say, in my case, I'm not a big fan of the solo player mode, and I would rather play the multiplayer. So I still think this is an interesting move, but can they make it right? I don't know. I also think it's very not from just a selling or a cash-in standpoint, but I think that Battle Royale still is the number one mode in terms of creating good experiences and good storylines. We've seen like it's a very easy way to maintain players and have a long longevity in the game, because it's never the same. It's always a lot of randomness included, mixed with a good portion of skill, which I think is very compelling for a developer to include. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, of course. I think it is definitely an interesting game mode. Beyond the fact that it's successful, it is design-wise and gameplay-wise, it is an interesting mode. So I understand that people are interested in it, and I would love to see. Personally, I didn't really fall in love with either PUBG or Fortnite. So I would love to have one developer creating a version of that mode that I can enjoy and that I would, jump on the on the bandwagon. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've seen it so many, even with MOBAs recently. We have obviously League of Legends and Dota 2, and then after that, there's obviously Heroes of the Storm, which is a distant third that still works for Blizzard, but after that it's so difficult. Anyway, we'll see how it goes, but I would love to see a mode that I actually enjoy playing. I just don't think it's going to come for Call of Duty or Battlefield 5. Maybe we'll have to wait for Blizzard to make one, and that I will like.
Yeah, they're obviously working on the secret titles, of course.
Oh, maybe that's it. Yeah.
But I think just your statement here shows that there's still a demand for a third option or alternative. That's something that is a little bit more compelling. I still think that Call of Duty has the sort of how would I say a setting in its universe that will fit very well. That Fortnite and PUBG hasn't tried anymore. I think it's still a lot of experimentation that can be done with team formats, landscapes and settings. So if they actually decide to go for this, as you obviously say here, there's might be a third alternative.
And I think, the more I think about it, when I look at the history of the different genres we've seen, if we look at racing games, which were really big late 90s, early 2000s, you had, Gran Turismo and Wipeout and Burnout and Need for Speed and a bunch of different types of games within that genre. And even if you look at fighting games, you have Street Fighter and King of Fighters and Tekken and Soul Calibur and so many different versions of that core concept. Maybe it's true. Maybe you're right. Maybe there are many things that can still be explored in the Battle Royale genre, and us rolling our eyes already going like, oh, everyone's doing a Battle Royale. It might be a little bit of lack of foresight or insight or some kind of sight, because developers can absolutely, they're not necessarily going to make Fortnite but with different skins, or or PUBG but with different skins. Maybe there's stuff to be explored that will become really interesting for different people who are not currently as obsessed with the existing ones. So yeah, you've convinced me. I'm actually kind of excited now about less eye rolly than I was. I'm a little bit excited about this.
Yeah, I'm not going to ramble on too long about this, but just one more thing is I also think that PUBG is still a very flawed product in terms of the gaming studio obviously has still issues to tackle, like rubber banding, unstable servers, cheating, and I think I would really like to see another bigger studio take up something like this and see what they can work with in terms of connection, server stability, and offer a really good product.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. The problem there is the resources. I think they're a small studio and they're surely trying to scale up, but they're not prepared. I don't think they were prepared for the success.
Definitely not.
We're getting a new Serious Sam. Some people are going to be very happy about it. I've personally never really played Serious Sam, but I've heard it described as Duke Nukem, but good. I think that's a bit harsh for Duke Nukem, but for the recent ones, maybe it applies. So anyway, Serious Sam is coming back. That's pretty cool. Sea of Thieves, we're seeing a new roadmap for the game, and you were telling me before we started recording that you got really into Sea of Thieves. I think it remains a mystery for many people, or at least there's not enough content. So is the roadmap going to fix the issues that some people have been talking about in Sea of Thieves?
You know, it's funny. Sea of Thieves really is this sort of enigma of a game that everyone both praises and criticizes for the same reason. I think I would say I have at least 60 hours played in the game right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people fell in love with this game and then wanted more, and that was where the issue came, right?
Yeah, definitely, and that's probably what when me and my friends we sit down and play this game, we think, oh, this game is so beautiful, but wouldn't it be fun if they added this or this? And that's how the discussion goes all the time. I think if we just talked about Battle Royale, and I think Sea of Thieves incorporates a little bit of that in terms of how it the quests themselves is really boring in the game, but it's a segue towards all those meetings with other players, the confrontation.
Right. It's a reason to it's just a reason to get people in the same place and into a conflict.
Yeah, exactly. So now that they announced their roadmap, finally, I think it's been interesting to follow how Rare in terms of communication with their player base has been lackluster, to say the least. But finally, we have this roadmap basically laying out that we will get an update called The Hungering Deep now in May, and plans spanning across all the way to the summer, I think. But basically, they said that they will add in The Hungering Deep a new AI threat to the world, that crews will have to work together and discover ways to defeat this boss. And when I hear this, I think it's great with content, but it's still the main issue with the game, for me at least, is still the core gameplay.
Really?
Yes. The redundant and repetitive quest system, and that the only rewards are the cosmetic ones, right, and very limited sort of cosmetic things. Right now we're seeing mostly focusing on clothes, not so much on the ship itself. I would love to see something more incorporated with the ship design or adding specific traits to the ship. But as Rare have announced now, it's more about the interaction between different ships and sort of maintaining that feel that you interact with other crew. And I just feel that it's a temporary fix to the game. It will be fun that they add something new, but it's still the fighting, for example, is also so simple. You go to an island, you pick up a treasure, you fight 6 skeletons with the exact same attack animation, just spamming left mouse click all the time, and this won't go away. And this is something I would love to see them work more with. More challenges in terms of enemies, new sort of quest systems, just something that feels refreshing for when the game shines.
And that's not
when you meet.
That's not what you're seeing in the roadmap?
Not right now, no. They've also announced this, that they will have weekly events, which is a little bit vague at the moment. We don't really know what exactly it inclines. Hopefully they keep telling us that they're actually listening in very closely to the player base right now. So perhaps this is something they will address. But right now it's just a temporary fix, this Hungering Deep.
Okay. All right. Well, so maybe they will announce things at at E3. Actually, I'm very
One can
curious to
hope.
see. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what Microsoft is going to be doing at E3 because even though we did mention they're doing well as a lagging behind Sony, they have to they things have been brewing in the gaming division of Microsoft with Phil Spencer gaining ranks and stuff like that, and I think they can show us the next 18 12 to 18 months of the console and get people excited again, and that obviously E3 is the opportunity to do that. So I'm very
Right.
very curious, probably more curious than for Nintendo and Sony. I'm very curious about the Microsoft conference and to see what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I'm curious as well.
You don't have any company meetings where they tell you everything that the parent company is doing?
I can't deny anything.
Okay, all right, excellent. We'll have to wait and see. The other little tidbits we wanted to talk about: Valve is acquiring Camposanto, the developer of Firewatch, and upcoming in the Valley of Gods, Into the Valley of Gods, a really interesting narrative game. Valve did say, or Gabe Newell did say a few weeks ago, that they're going to get back into making games. I'm not sure anyone quite thought that they meant we're going to buy companies that make game, and so ta-da, there you go. Hopefully that's not the only thing they're doing, but I'm curious to see what Camposanto is going to be doing with the resources that Valve can put behind them. Definitely an interesting developer. I really enjoyed Firewatch, but then ultimately was
Beautiful
disappointed. I think, yeah, it was really beautiful, really interesting way of doing the narrative thing. The first 10 minutes, the things written on the screen for the beginning of that game is just text. Best written anything I've ever seen, almost. It was really amazing. But yeah, so anyway, Valve is buying companies, apparently.
Yeah, it's interesting just to see. We know that they're developing new 3 new VR games, which is interesting in continuing this this thing for VR games in general. So, but as you say, and Camposanto of all studios, which is still pretty small, as you say, they have a very interesting way of narrative, and I think that their new game, what was it, the Egypt setting? Yeah, I would love to see what they bring to the table if they sort of maintain the same narrative structure. So,
Yeah.
but this is still I can't get my head around. It's a very very weird buy-up.
Yeah, it is really strange. It's not something that you would expect Valve to do, but I guess why not is my is my feeling. It's like, sure, okay, why not? But it's not something that seems very logical. It maybe they met and they hit it off and they were hanging out and they're like, hey, wouldn't you like to have the power of Valve behind you? And Camposanto was like, yeah, sure. And that's it. I mean, they were very complimentary in the...
Yeah, one thing to credit Valve for is that they're very good to spot talent. And I
Yeah.
would say that Valve takes pride in having very talented developers working at the company. And just take the example of Dota, for example, with Ice Frog, I think is the prime example. And as you say, in this meeting, probably they saw which sharing the same values and clearly enjoying Firewatch themselves. So I can't wait to see what they bring to the table.
Yeah. And that's reminiscent of what they did when they got the students who made Portal back in the company. But anyway, so we'll see what happens there. Belgium has declared loot boxes gambling, and so they're illegal. And that was, I talked last time about what happens in the Netherlands. I believe I did talk about it, which wasn't quite declaring them illegal. It was some aspects of it which were basically, it wasn't a big deal for the developers. Here, it is a big deal, and they're illegal. They have to conform to Belgian law within a few weeks, and the only way to conform would be to remove the loot boxes. And some of the games, it concerns all developers, and some of the games obviously can't be adapted. So it will be interesting to see if they just stop selling them to Belgian customers, because I think that's a much easier way of handling the problem than actually changing the game just for Belgium. But then you get into European law, because obviously Belgium is part of the EU, and does that decision in Belgium apply? I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't tell you, but I'm guessing it has implications. And then it would be taken to other courts and other decisions. It's probably going to take a while to figure out what happens be outside of Belgium. But I think my understanding is that in Belgium it's settled. It's basically you cannot sell games with loot boxes in, whether they're cosmetic or not doesn't matter. You can't have loot boxes, and that's it. So I don't know how that's going to work out.
I think it's a very rash movement, and it doesn't feel thought out to begin with. Just seeing what titles is included on the list, I found it like just seeing Overwatch on that list, and when it just feels weird and not very thought out in terms. Okay, so this is cosmetics, but what about game changing loot boxes?
It does definitely feel like a knee-jerk reaction, and or maybe a political reaction, which is, anyway, I mean, we've talked about loot boxes quite a bit, and I think that it's pretty clear my opinion on it. At the very least, cosmetics should not necessarily be a problem. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens there. It is definitely the most significant decision in that debate that's been happening for months, the most significance in the gravity of it. But it's also from a relatively small country, so it's easier for developers to say, fine, whatever, we won't sell your games. We won't sell our games to your citizens. And that's it. Problem solved. And I really think that many of them are going to decide to do that if that is really if the decision is inflexible.
Yeah, what is interesting though is to see if other European countries follow the same suit and adapt what Belgium and Netherlands has done, because it's all happened very fast. And what does the other politicians do when they see this sort of chain reaction? That's what I'm sort of worried about, to see what the other countries will do when they pick up this news, and if they will be as rash in their decisions as well.
I mean, the Netherlands was kind of a quick decision, but what they were demanding was relatively, I think, acceptable. Reasonable is not my place to decide, or maybe it is, but I think it's definitely acceptable. They were saying, you can't trade items in games because that leads to trading outside of games for money, inevitably. And so, all right, that seems like a reasonable demand. But the Belgian decision is one that I can't get behind. It's basically every loot box ever is illegal. That's it. You can't have loot boxes in your game. And that at the very least sounds rash.
Very.
Sega and SNK, actually, first Sega is announcing the Mega Drive Mini in Japan. You're also going to have classic Genesis and Master Systems games coming to the Switch. And you also have a Shenmue and Shenmue 2 compilation coming to PS4, Xbox One, and PC. All of which kind of, I think the one I like the most in all of this is Sega games coming to the Switch. I'm sure some games are going to be fun. I wasn't a big Sega guy. I was more of a Nintendo guy. And I still didn't buy the Super Nintendo Mini. So that's how nostalgic I am about these things. Shenmue and Shenmue 2, I think, are going to be wake-up calls for many, many, many people who are going to realize those games as groundbreaking, or at least the first one, as groundbreaking in a open world, let's simulate the real world type of design. At the time, they're going to realize it really wasn't a great game. Or it isn't now anymore.
This is going to become a catastrophe, I would say.
Oh, really? You think so?
Yeah, releasing Shenmue today is, I can't see how, as you said, it was groundbreaking, but releasing it today, I couldn't see any reason for people to go back and pick it up. Maybe it's a good wave to get new people involved, but it won't, as it hits the market, I can't see how it will actually be. Like, it won't work. And I would say the same thing for the upcoming one. The graphics is just horrendous.
No, I agree. And I think, it's interesting because Shenmue has always been in the conversation. It's something that never gets completely out of the conversation of gaming, and even more now with the Kickstarter and the Shenmue 3 being developed. But I don't think anyone was really asking for it to be re-released. The only thing they're saying they want to make the definitive version of Shenmue, and I don't see them working on it very much. I would see a port, maybe with the updating the resolution, obviously. So the minimum amount of work they're going to do, because they're not going to sell many of them. So
yeah, I sort of see this as an artist trying to close his work and get some closure on a long series. But question is if it will ruin the brand or the people's memories. I don't believe in this sort of discussion, but there will still be consequences for Shenmue, that's for sure. But
that's really interesting. I think Yu Suzuki, who's developing Shenmue 3, might be cursing Sega because there is a mini thirst for Shenmue, and Shenmue, this compilation is coming out in 2018. So I wonder if people are going to look at this, play it a little bit, and consider, oh, all right, well, I don't. Even those who cared about Shenmue 3 are going to go, actually, I don't really need it, and not care about it anymore. So Shenmue 3 is even more in trouble now that Shenmue 1 and 2 are coming out. It's
yeah, definitely. Well, then I would say in terms of nostalgia, and perhaps you're not into nostalgia as much as I am, but I'm definitely looking forward to the Sega Mini, and it's also in sort of weird place, I would say, because the titles coming to that game is in some ways already out. Sega is using Steam as a platform for releasing their Sonic games. We've seen
that's true.
The sort of rebirth of good Sonic games with Sonic Mania. So that's also a very weird place for this console to come out. I don't know why people should buy it, really. I myself was hoping for Phantasy Star, Shining Force. I don't know if you remember Quackshot, but there's not that many good titles or memorable titles as Sonic, which is already out there.
Right, yeah. So did you buy a Super Nintendo Mini, or?
I did not.
So you're not that much into nostalgia.
I blame Nintendo's tactics with how many consoles they want to sell. And that
you wanted one, but you couldn't get it.
Exactly. And will Sega do the same thing? That remains to be seen.
I think they're realistic, and they don't think they're going to sell that many. And I think in the case of Nintendo, they were wrong. But in the case of Sega, they will be right. So they won't produce a huge amount of units, I think. SNK,
I'm still looking forward to it.
If you're into nostalgia, you might want an SNK, Neo Geo Mini, which is probably going to be announced fairly soon for the 40 years of SNK. They teased something, and it's probably going to be that Neo Geo Mini with a few games. I think it's kind of the same as Sega. They're available on Steam and on the Nintendo Switch. I would be more inclined to buying a Neo Geo Mini because the console means a little bit more to me, but I still wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be so inclined that I would actually buy one. So
I don't believe it actually was released in Sweden back in the old days. So I remember seeing one of those consoles a couple of years after its release and thought it was very unique, and it was like, oh, what is this strange device? Where's my Game Boy, basically?
Yeah.
But definitely picking up this is something like all form of nostalgia for me is very positive, and I think there's definitely gamers who there's a small demand for these kinds of nostalgia kicks.
I think for the SNK, for the Neo Geo, a little bit, not more, but it's more of a curiosity, as you said. It's a weird thing that has a status symbol. It was so expensive. It was 3 or 4 times the price of a regular console, and the games were half the price of the console itself because of the way it worked in the beginning. So there is some aura of mystery or something around the Neo Geo that might make it a little bit more attractive than something else. But even there, I'm not completely sure. So anyway, that's gonna be it for our show today. Thank you so much, Pat, for being with us. It was great. Can you tell?
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find you? I guess on Twitter or anywhere else.
Yeah, definitely. I do have a self, but since it's in Swedish,
you cut off for a second. You have a.
I have a podcast myself, but since it's in Swedish, so I strongly recommend you don't listen to it.
Well, you might have some Swedish listeners here, so you never know.
Yeah, in case if we have some Swedish listeners, I would say check out Späckat. It can be found on iTunes or any other platform with podcast apps. You can also find me tweeting a lot about esports on Twitter under Per Landin, which is just my name in
I'll have the link in the show notes.
Definitely. Patrick, it was super fun. I'm a little bit disappointed we didn't talk as much Blizzard as I was like.
Well, you know what? I'll have to ask you to come back when there's more Blizzard news to discuss in that case.
Yes, please do.
We'll do
Especially Heroes of the Storm. I'm hugely involved in the esports production there, so...
Cool. Well, we definitely will at some point. I'm sure, maybe for Heroes of the Dorm or something like that. We'll do that.
Oh, amazing.
And for me, it's Not Patrick on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm Not Patrick everywhere. And you can also find the show at FrenchSpin.com along with other stuff that you might enjoy. So go check it out. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Take care.